It's July of 2014 in Moscow. The Russian military is enjoying its recent annexation of Crimea. Meanwhile, the Institute of Ruspolitology holds its inaugural conference just outside the city. The event's keynote speaker, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Among the thousands of audience members enthralled by Putin's speech is a young woman from Florida, future state representative Carolina Amesty, studying at Moscow State University on a scholarship. But back home in the United States, Amesty's life is far from glamorous. Amesty's parents, poor immigrants from Venezuela, run a small unaccredited school in Central Florida, barely scraping by, racked by insolvency and a litany of lawsuits. But that all changed in 2020 at a Donald Trump rally, where Amesty met her multimillionaire fiancé, Jesus Rosario. Overnight, the 27-year-old Amesty opened a restaurant, bought a mansion with funds from her nonprofit, and launched a successful political campaign, catapulting her to the Florida State House of Representatives. But today, Amesty faces allegations of corruption and cronyism, allegations the fledgling conservative firebrand vehemently denies. Now, the story of Carolina Amesty's rise from poverty to power, born from a past fraught with obscurity, amidst a canvas of grandeur. The story begins in Venezuela. It's the mid-1990s. Caracas, a vibrant yet volatile city, grapples with economic instability and social unrest. Under President Rafael Caldera, the government struggles with rampant inflation, poverty, and crime, exacerbated by over-reliance on oil exports and a fractured political system. By the end of the decade, crime rates will double, making Venezuela one of the world's most violent countries. By 1999, the socialist takeover had already begun, as Hugo Chavez came to power. Amidst this turmoil, the Amesty family fled the country, eventually settling in Orlando, Florida.
From WFTV Channel 9 Orlando, coverage you can count on. This is Eyewitness News at noon.
If you think Orlando's airport is going through some growing pains, and who doesn't, what would it be like to fly in and out of the world's busiest airport?
In 2003, Carolina's father, Juan Carlos, came up with an idea to survive in America. He would start a church and Christian university. Orlando attracted more than just Disney's magic touch, with faith healers like Benny Hinn beginning their careers in the city. By 2007, Central Christian University claimed to host nearly 27 campuses around the world. Most, if they existed at all, now appear defunct.
The opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Following the 2008 recession, the Amesty family fell into financial turmoil with bouts of lawsuits and insolvency. Searching for a way out, young Carolina Amesty sought out an education at Seminole State Community College before transferring to the University of Central Florida. In 2014, Amesty received a scholarship to study in Russia. Enrolling in Moscow State University, Amesty studied Russian political theory at the college shortly after the invasion and illegal occupation of Crimea. That summer, she attended the first-ever Congress held by the Institute of Ruspolitology, where Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered the keynote address to the gathering. By the time Amesty returned to the United States, her views on international politics began to shift. With Russia's traditionalist laws combating gay rights, Christian nationalists on the American right perceived Vladimir Putin the president of Russia as a potential ally. On April 15, 2015, Amesty took her first baby steps into the political arena, standing front and center on stage during Senator Marco Rubio's presidential campaign kickoff in Miami at the Freedom Tower.
I live in an exceptional country where the son of a bartender and a maid could have the same dreams and the same future as those who come from power and privilege.
As Amesty expanded her political horizons in the United States, she maintained her connections in Russia, visiting the country several times in the years following her program. A friend of Amesty's who requested anonymity recalls the future state representative's political leanings at the time of the rally.
At the time, I was an evangelical Christian, and I would often go to her church, and it was mainly Spanish, so obviously I was interested in a date, but I was a believer as well, and we would have discussions at great length about her interest in finding an intersection between Russia and Russian Christianity and Vladimir Putin and American evangelicals, that maybe the United States could have an alliance with Russia on those subjects.
As Marco Rubio's influence waned, Donald Trump's rhetoric on Russia increasingly resonated with her own views.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press.
Amesty transformed not only into a fervent supporter of the MAGA movement, but even attended a drag show hosted by the disgraced right-wing activist Milo Yiannopoulos, a paradox blatantly contrary to her Christian university's code of conduct. The Amesty family's business model centered on enrolling poor students from around the world, many of whom were unaware that the family's university lacked accreditation. While Carolina Amesty worked to carve out a niche in American politics, her father, Juan Carlos, set his sights abroad, aiming to elevate their school's operations from a simple nonprofit into a political intermediary. Leveraging Amesty's evangelical connections within the Dominican Republic. One of these connections, former Dominican President Leonel Fernandez, a fellow traveler. The circumstances under which Pastor Juan Carlos first met President Leonel Fernandez of the Dominican Republic remain unclear. Bertica Cabrera Morris, a Republican campaign consultant who urged Amesty to run for office, also shares close ties with the former president. President Fernandez, elected to office 3 times and serving intermittently from 1996 to 2012, faced persistent allegations of corruption throughout his administrations. Critics claimed that infrastructure projects and public contracts were often awarded based on favoritism to companies that had a history of donating to the president's nonprofit organization, the Global Foundation for Democracy and Development, otherwise known as FUNGLOD. Calls within the Dominican Republic for comprehensive investigations into FUNGLOD's suspected money laundering and financial misconduct were swiftly dismissed, hampered by the lack of an independent judiciary.
Gobierno del corrupto, abusador y cobarde de Leonel Fernández Reina. ¿Qué ocurrió? Además de apoderarse del Ministerio Público y también del Poder Judicial, ¿cuál era el fundamento de esa decisión? Que las acusaciones que recibieran de corrupción sus funcionarios no pudieran ser conocidas.
Anonymous whistleblowers on social media and the blogosphere allege that Fernandez often looks to entities outside the Dominican Republic to arrange his foundation's transactions. Over the last decade, Amesty's nonprofit hosted several events with Fernandez and his Foundation for Democracy and Development at the school's property in Orlando. By the late 2010s, the family's economic situation started to change. Located in one of Orlando's poorest communities, the family's nonprofit purchased the university property, mysteriously securing a massive loan. As the 2020 presidential election neared, Amesty revved up her domestic political engines, hobnobbing with Republican power players and leveraging her Hispanic connections, hosting a rally with Latinos for Trump, led by former Proud Boys chairman Enrique Tarrio, currently serving a federal prison sentence of 22 years for seditious conspiracy, found guilty of orchestrating a plot to prevent the certification of the 2020 presidential election results on January 6, 2021. Though Tarrio himself did not appear at the rally, Amesty's avenue to wealth and power ultimately took a different route. At the insistence of Republican political consultant Bertica Cabrera-Morris, the young Politico attended a Trump rally in 2020 where the strategist introduced the future state representative's fiancé, Jesus Rosario. However, evidence exists that Amesty knew the Rosarios much earlier, whose family church operates in the Dominican Republic. Rosario, a successful businessman with a long career as a car dealer and real estate investor, originally immigrated from the Dominican Republic. Rosario's businesses reportedly brought in more than $100 million in revenue in 2010. Almost twice Amesty's age, Rosario separated from his ex-wife just prior to the 27-year-old's engagement. One of Rosario's real estate ventures involved flipping a waterfront property in St. Petersburg, Florida into a mansion. Rosario's longtime business associate, Kurt Chana, initially bought a 25% stake in the project, being repaid interest-free a few months later. Rosario sold the property on May 19, 2021, making a profit of nearly $3.6 million. Shortly thereafter, Amesty and her father laid the groundwork to launch a restaurant in a former Wendy's building just down the road from the university, with a loan from the Chana family, a move some experts allege constituted a bid to avoid paying gift taxes. That same spring of 2022, the Amesty family and Carolina's fiancé purchased a mansion through the school, where each served as board members for $1,325,000. As the family moved into their new upscale neighborhood, they went further, requesting a tax exemption for their new mega home as a non-profit in an effort to shield Juan Carlos, Carolina, and her wealthy fiancé from a tax hit. The government ultimately denied the request, and the newly christened restaurant, Pollo Juan, soon closed and subsequently fell behind on taxes.
Red wave rising. That is the focus of tonight's angle.
It's going to be a wave election, and you're going to lose the Senate, and I'll bet you $1,000 right now.
With Donald Trump's loss in 2020 came new opportunities for the young Latina Republican. Analysts debated the possibility of a red wave in the 2022 midterm elections, and Bertica Morris, one of Amesty's closest confidants, encouraged her to run for the Florida State House of Representatives. By being an officer at her father's nonprofit and opening the restaurant with the help of her wealthy fiancé, Amesty boosted a resume otherwise lacking in qualifications. Despite minimal net worth, Amesty inexplicably injected her campaign with a $200,000 personal loan. With Amesty's mystery loan and marginal funding from startup contributions, an influx of donations came pouring in. Locked and loaded, Amesty looked to Bertica Morris for guidance, arranging a crucial introduction to one of the Florida GOP's most influential but under-the-radar political consultants, Brett Doster. Morris and Doster originally met through the Jeb Bush political network, whose campaign employed Doster for multiple election seasons. Morris, a former Bush bundler, successfully lobbied Bush for appointments to the Central Florida Transit Authority, as well as chairman of the Valencia College Board of Trustees. As Amesty's chief political consultant, Doster laundered thousands of dollars of cash through his firm to avoid campaign finance reporting and prevent the leakage of materials related to Amesty's time in Russia. But Doster ultimately sought to be on the offensive. Under the cloak of his consultancy firm, Doster bought endorsements and purchased off-the-books op-eds in phony news publications, routing funds through a variety of personal and business accounts. The attacks disseminated opposition research material collected on Amesty's opponent, Ali Braswell. Collected long before election season kicked off, Doster's dossier focused significantly on the businessman's past financial insolvency, a facet of Amesty's own past obfuscated from the media narrative. The rough-and-tumble campaign would ultimately pay off.
Carolina Amesty, nice to see you this morning. Thanks for joining me. So you're saying that
on November 8, 2022, Carolina Amesty defeated Ali Braswell in a resounding victory. Once in office, Amesty's voting record solidified her as a magnet for controversy. Central Christian Academy, a private school owned by Amesty's parents, located on the campus of Central Christian University, received at least $262,000 in January 2024 alone from the state of Florida. But the newly sworn-in Republican lawmaker sought to secure even more state funding for private schools, benefiting her own Central Christian, supporting a bill removing limitations on the use of public appropriations for private school tuition. Of even greater concern to watchdogs, Amesty's request for $3 million from the state to benefit an organization supporting her campaign. But the outrage fell on deaf ears. The freshman GOP lawmaker again hired quasi-legitimate news blogs in response, attributing any attacks to nothing more than partisan vitriol and biased coverage. But the skeletons kept flowing. Further investigation by the Orlando Sentinel revealed that Amesty, who promoted her success as a business owner and educator during her campaign, touted false information about her family's Christian university, and that the legislator failed to pay taxes on her residential and commercial properties. Making matters worse, one of Central Christian's professors, purportedly under the school's employ, filed a complaint alleging that the state legislator falsely notarized an employment document, insinuating forgery. When confronted, Amesty resigned as a state notary, halting an investigation by the state board, as the Sentinel laid out the case against Amesty. The Republican filed a defamation lawsuit against the news publication. But Amesty's crusade against the Sentinel quickly evaporated. Backed into a corner by the facts of the case, the embattled state representative relented, dropping the lawsuit. With the Sentinel's expose on Amesty's alleged financial impropriety, the state legislator and her fiancé moved down the road to a new address, an address with baggage of its own. April 3rd, 2016. To most, just another routine day in the lives of Panamanians. But today, the world is about to witness something extraordinary, something unprecedented. Panama is on the brink of a seismic event, not of the earth, but of the financial world. This would be no ordinary tremor. It would be a life-altering shift in the tectonic plates of global finance. When the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung released the Panama Papers, it unraveled the enigmatic web of the global elite, turning the world's understanding of power and wealth upside down overnight. 11.5 million leaked and encrypted documents from Mossack Fonseca, a Panama-based law firm, were dumped onto the World Wide Web. Among the trove of files, the names of thousands of individuals who worked with Mossack or an associated law firm to conceal wealth, either for purposes of tax avoidance or illegal activity. The individuals involved in such schemes utilize shell companies, trusts, offshore bank accounts, and a variety of mechanisms to achieve their desired ends, usually in a foreign country or territory. Pariah governments or sanctioned entities may also use this method to conduct financial transactions in a more covert fashion. Based on information gathered in the Panama Papers, Andrés Galavis Leifmans, an agent of Petróleos de Venezuela, a government-run oil company headed by the cousin of Hugo Chavez, also holds stake in Petroleo Energy Corporation, based in the British Virgin Islands. Leifman's counterpart in the corporation, Dimitri Miguel Feo, a fellow shareholder of Petroleo Energies. But Feo's business investments extend beyond oil and into personal and commercial real estate. One such property located in Central Florida now hosts State Representative Carolina Amesty and her fiancé, Jesus Rosario. As media pressure mounted public outrage against Central Christian University's questionable purchase of the family's mansion, Amesty and her fiancé sought a quick fix. Feo, a longtime friend, stepped up to the plate as Rosario's tax-dodging scheme fell apart. Amesty's connections to individuals associated with the Venezuelan government shares commonalities with the story of former Republican Representative David Rivera. Rivera served in the Florida House of Representatives from 2002 to 2010, and then in the U.S. House of Representatives from 2011 to 2013. During that time, campaign finance investigations and personal conduct marred Rivera's tenure in office. As federal investigators probed Rivera's business dealings, they discovered the former congressman's lobbying activities on behalf of the Venezuelan government, specifically through the country's state-owned oil company, Petróleos de Venezuela. U.S. authorities arrested Rivera in connection with the federal investigation involving a $50 million consulting contract with a U.S. affiliate of Venezuela's state-owned oil company. At the heart of the issue, Rivera's failure to register as a foreign lobbyist, a requirement for any work related to Venezuela's government. Amesty's degree of proximity to Venezuelan interests, as well as her ties to governments and foreign nationals, yielded no solid conclusions. Nevertheless, Dominican President Luis Abinader recently appointed businessman Roger Rincon Pichardo, a close friend of Amesty, to the post of vice consul to the United States. Pichardo, a family associate of Jesus Rosario, Amesty's fiancé, also owns an investment company in Dubai as part of an offshoring operation. In addition to Amesty's landlord, Pichardo's boss, President Abinader, and his global network of connections appear in yet another set of leaks, the Pandora Papers, cashing in as the wealthiest public official in the Dominican Republic with a net worth of approximately $70 million. With secrecy protections offered by offshore jurisdictions such as the British Virgin Islands and Aruba, journalists possess a finite supply of information to deal with. But in 2024, less than 2 years into Amesty's tenure, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement opened a file involving the state representative and her family's nonprofit related to false notarization. As an active investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement unfolds, evidence suggests that Amesty notarized a form in 2021 falsely, claiming that Robert Schaefer, a respected educator, was employed at the school. The GOP lawmaker pointed to Schaefer's age, questioning his memory. But 3 handwriting experts concluded that the signature on the form did not align with Schaefer's. 2 of the experts also suggested that Amesty herself forged Schaefer's name, a third-degree felony under Florida law, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. And now, some sources close to Amesty contend the state legislator also enabled the falsification of her own signature on election documents. However, the veracity of these claims, without examination by a forensic document examiner, appear dubious at best. Regardless of the signatory's identity, the discrepant filings provided Central Christian with an avenue to obtain and renew the school's state license. Without licensing or legitimate filings, the rising GOP star risks not only funding from the state, but her own legal jeopardy. Carolina Amesty's rise to political power, one of stark contrasts and sharp turns, originates from humble beginnings in Venezuela. Clouded by accusations of indiscretion and impropriety, Amesty's boisterous denials grow daily in tandem with the outrage of her detractors. Detractors now rivaling the GOP Mavericks' pushback. From Moscow to Santo Domingo, and Panama City to Tallahassee, the fledgling lawmaker may soon be looking for amnesty internationally.